Oh, assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sister. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so the political dimensions of the strife in Yemen are complex and multi-layered, making the conflict underway a game with many players. The Saudi-led coalition is currently working hand in hand with the UAE and other allies, and has been bombing cities and towns across Yemen. How exactly did this coalition come into existence, and who was it who spearheaded its formation?
Hello. Sorry,
Um,
sister. The line. I couldn't really hear the question. I'm really sorry about that. I think it's the connection here.
so
We've
sorry
got
about
heavy
that.
snow in the UK.
I was just asking about the Saudi led coalition and how exactly it was formed and who spearheaded it.
All right. Well, Saudi Arabia was when the conflict actually had its roots in the failure of a political transition, which was supposed to bring stability to Yemen following the Arab Spring uprising, and that's forced its long-time authoritarian President Ali Abdullah Saleh to hand over power to his deputy, Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi, in 2011. But Mr. Hadi struggled to deal with a variety of problems, and including the separatist movement in the south. So the Houthi movement, which champions Yemen's Zaidi Muslim minority, fought a series of rebellions against Saleh during the previous decade, and took advantage of the new president's weakness by taking control of their northern heartland of Sada province and neighboring areas. And this actually spurred on, the Houthis in late 2014 and early 2015 to rebel and gradually took over the capital of Sana'a. So then, alarmed by the rise of a group they believed to be backed militarily by the regional powers in Iran, Saudi Arabia, and 8 other mostly Sunni Arab states decided to begin an air campaign aimed at defeating the Houthis and ending Iranian influence in Yemen and restoring Mr. Hadi's government. So that's actually just a little context as to what happened, and then they obviously started their assaults on Yemen after that. But unfortunately, they are their neighbors. Saudi Arabia, Yemen is their neighbors, holding their Muslim brothers and sisters. So it's a very, very unfortunate war that has taken place.
Okay, and then the war, which began approximately 6 years ago, has created an unprecedented humanitarian crisis and thousands of casualties. Despite this, world leaders have turned a blind eye to the plight of millions of Yemenis and continue to deal and trade with MBS and MBZ, despite the atrocities they are committing on a daily basis. Do you think that countries may sanction Saudi Arabia and the UAE if the war in Yemen continues, particularly in light of Joe Biden having entered into office?
I would hope so. I would really, really hope, because now last year alone we saw over 1,020 incidents entailing harm to civilians and 900 of civilians who were killed, and the malnutrition has, risen into devastating numbers in Yemen at the moment. So I really do hope that with the presidency of Joe Biden and other countries around the world, that they will start to take a firm stance on Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is, a country that has the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. They are a country that we would really want to show and promote the human rights, but they are not following the sunnah of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're not following those rules by bombing Yemen and harming these innocent civilians. So I would hope that other countries around the world do take action, inshallah.
Okay, and then UNICEF has declared the situation in Yemen to be an emergency as millions of people, predominantly children, suffer from malnutrition, as you'd mentioned, and an array of illnesses. Civilians are living in squalor and facing food insecurity, and oftentimes humanitarian assistance received is insufficient. Can you delve into these statements and explain why Yemen cannot afford another year of impunity?
Well, it's estimated that already there's about 1.5 million children in Yemen living in, the most stricken areas of South Yemen, which were worst affected by the war. And this is already the statistics that we have. And, humanitarian crisis says that Yemen is desperate now for intervention, because they've had an ongoing war that has been affecting the economy, affecting, innocent civilians. And they really cannot afford to have yet another year of these armed bombings without intervention, because, they say that there may be many children under the age of 5 who are going to be killed and wiped out. It could entirely wipe out a generation from children under the age of 5, which is devastating statistics. And this is why I, as a Muslim journalist, like to write stories like this to really bring this to the attention of our Muslim Ummah, and also educate, hoping that perhaps somebody from Saudi Arabia or the UAE will take heed and really think about the civilians that they are, impacting with this war, and perhaps even put a stop to it.
Okay, and then in light of what you said, and with Yemen being the poorest country in the Middle East, do you envision an end to the war? And if so, how would that look?
Yeah, I would hope that, there would be an end to the war. I mean, the war has brought Yemen to the brink of starvation now. I think what needs to be done is Joe Biden also needs to intervene on this, and other Western powers also need to speak about this with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, try to actually create some kind of interventions and come to an amicable solution. And that would be in steps of trying to end the war in Yemen.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today and for that riveting discussion about Saudi Arabia and the UAE in Yemen.
Thank you so much, sister. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was Tasneem Nazir, author, copywriter, and award-winning journalist, talking to us about why Yemen will not survive another year of Saudi and UAE impunity.
Kiki's, the taste with a kick, our revamped exclusive restaurant and